now called to order at 5:05 p.m. This meeting is being broadcast live on Glendale TV, viewable on Spectrum Cable, Channel 6, and AT&T Uverse, and finally Channel 99. Meetings are also streamed live in high definition on the city's webpage, glendaleca.gov/live, on youtube.com/myglendale, on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire devices using a free app called ScreenWeave, and choosing Glendale TV from the menu. I'm curious, do we keep track of how many viewers are on these sites? Any of these?
There's a viewer count.
There's a viewer count?
And just don't get too competitive with some of the other boards and commissions.
Okay. I imagine they're always also available on all these apps as well. I'm just curious.
Yeah,
Okay.
that I don't know that part.
I'll look that up. Meetings are also archived on the city website for viewing at any time on glendaleca.gov/agendas. For public comments and questions during our meeting, here is the phone number for you to please call in. Area code 818-937-8100. 937-8100. City staff will be submitting the questions and comments in real time to the appropriate person. Current HPC agendas are also available by visiting our website at glendaleca.gov. That concludes our opening comments. We now go to our agenda, and it is time for roll call. Who gets to do the honors today, Jay or Casey?
I will take care of that.
All right.
We have Commissioner Yurka has recused. Commissioner Morgan is absent. Commissioner Cragnati?
Here.
Commissioner Vartanian?
Here.
And Chair Doom.
Here.
3-0.
Excellent. Okay, bare minimum. Reports regarding the posting of our agenda for tonight's special meeting was posted on July 25th on the bulletin board outside our city hall. And I'm hoping everyone comes and looks at that once in a while. It is now item 3, approval of minutes for the commission meeting on April 21st, 2022, and of June 16th, 2022. Do we have any comments or changes to either of these minutes in these two previous meetings?
None.
No, I move to approve the minutes from the two previous. Can we do them together, Jay?
I don't see why not.
All right, for both meetings. I move to approve the minutes for both meetings.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. May we please have a roll call for approval of the minutes for April and June?
Okay, that was Commissioner Vartanian.
Commissioner Cragnati?
Cragnati, I seconded.
Yeah, I start.
she's
I always
asking.
start with the seconder.
Oh,
I don't know if
yeah,
that's
you get to
official.
vote.
or not, then why not?
To vote.
Vote.
Yes. Sorry,
Commissioner
I'm deep in
Cragnati.
thought.
Yes, please.
Chair Doom.
Yes.
Excellent.
Okay. Item number 4 is oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes. The Glendale Historical Preservation Commission may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. And we have no cards. Is that correct, Casey, for the record? Okay, no cards. So oral communication is closed.
No, actually, breaking news, we have a call for oral communication. We'll take this call. Kathy Yurka, you're on the air for oral communication.
Commissioner Yurka, are you there?
Kathy Yurka, are you there for oral communication?
I am. Good evening. My name is Kathy Yurka, and I am a member of the Historic Preservation Commission. The reason I'm calling is because I am recusing myself for the Grayson item. I was not made aware of this special meeting, and I didn't find out about it until yesterday afternoon. I am asking that the item, the update on the historic districts process, be removed, Chair Doom, and rescheduled for a meeting when I can attend. I was the commissioner who requested it be placed on the agenda. I believe Commissioner Vartanian seconded, and because I had no idea that the meeting was going to be tonight, and I am actually out of town and can't stay on the phone, I just would like it not to be heard in my absence and without my foreknowledge. I emailed Jay and Casey about this, but didn't hear back. Anyway, thank you very much for your time, and have a good night and a good meeting. Bye-bye.
And just for Ms. Yurka's information, we had already planned to not hold that item tonight, and we will wait for all 5 commissioners to be available before we have that discussion. So we are
thank you.
moving that forward to another evening sometime in the future soon.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi, Kathy. Have a good night. Enjoy your vacation. Any other phone calls? Or oral communication?
I'm sorry, no. No other callers.
Okay, so now I move on from oral communication to board commissioner member comments. Without Commissioner Morgan present, I'm at a loss of what's going on. I know it's summer. We had our car show and stuff in our city. Did anyone attend? Yes,
Oh,
Commissioner
I did not
Fagado.
attend the car show.
Okay,
I was
you
going to make
have
an announcement.
comments.
Though. I was going to make an announcement. Lorna is, and her, well, and many of the homeowner associations in the city will be celebrating National Night Out next Tuesday, this coming Tuesday. It's a fun opportunity for neighbors to get together and hang out, have some pizza. The Ross Point one's going to have pizza and a movie. I know Royal Canyon has one. They're kind of all over town. You've probably seen posters in your neighborhood. So if you have seen posters in your neighborhood, we strongly encourage you all to attend National Night Out next week.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Sure. You've been working hard.
Do you have any announcements, Lorna?
I have no announcements, and I'll just say I want to also thank GPD for putting together all the meetings leading up to NNO for all of their support. And, you know, this is an evening where we get together with our local police and fire departments and build community bonds and strengthen our neighborhood watch programs. So do come out.
Terrific. Thank you both. Any old business items, Jay, to discuss?
We have no old business tonight.
Okay, so now we're on item number 7, new business. And item A is the Grayson Repowering Project, review of demolition clearance application. And the project description has the Glendale Water and Power request review of the demolition clearance application regarding the demolition of the Grayson Power Plant boiler building as part of the Grayson Repowering Project. Am I to read the rest, or is that for?
That's fine like that.
Okay. And who do we have present with us this evening to speak on this item?
I'm going to begin the presentation.
All right.
We have a team that's going to be sharing some information with the commission. And I just have a quick introduction. And just by way of background, if you remember the extremely long, memorably long hearing in January of 2022, the commission received an update about this project and gave you background information about the environmental review process. And this is kind of a continuation to bring the demolition clearance application to the commission as we told you would be coming sometime soon, and here we are. So just for background, I have a photo up of the current look of the Grayson power plant. This is specifically the boiler building, the large blocky building. And if you don't remember, this was built in 1941 and then extended over the years. So there were like 4 campaigns of extensions. As the city grew and power needs grew, obviously the building grew to accommodate that. To remind you, we haven't done a lot of demolition clearance applications in the past. And this is a process that's codified, and when we did the code updates in 2019 and 2020, you were involved in discussions of various aspects of code changes that were being proposed, including to Chapter 1522. So in terms of the city's review of this project for the repowering of Grayson, the boiler building was identified as a potential historic resource in the EIR. The reason the demolition is proposed by GWP is the building takes up a lot of area, and in terms of the new project, which we'll have GWP's consultant and team telling you much more about than I can, but the issue was to provide more space so that new power generating turbines, a large battery farm, switchyard equipment, a water treatment facility, and then associated facilities, which include a workshop, a warehouse, and an administrative building, can now be built on the site where the boiler building and some other buildings and structures kind of are standing right now. The demolition permit section of the Glendale Municipal Code is 1522, Chapter 1522, and it establishes two prerequisites before the Building and Safety Division can issue a demolition permit. And this protection, this kind of process, is specifically designed to make sure that potentially historic buildings don't accidentally move through the process and end up getting a demolition permit. Obviously, this project is very different than something that would accidentally have happened. But the prerequisite for any consideration of a demolition clearance is that a project be identified for the site and approved for the site. Once that happens, before the demolition permit can be issued, a demolition clearance application has to be issued. And in this case, because Grayson was identified as a potential historic resource, the commission is considering this application. In terms of your options for tonight, you have an opportunity to ask questions. You'll hear from the public, I imagine, and then we'll, at the end, be taking a vote, and you're either in a position where you'll vote to approve the clearance or deny the clearance. That's the end game of tonight's session. So that's all I've got, and I wanted to introduce Christine Godinez from the City Attorney's Office, who will take us forward.
Good evening, members of the Commission. My name is Christine Godinez, and I am Principal Assistant City Attorney. And I just wanted to let you know we're glad to be back. We were here in January, although virtually. It's good to be here in person with you. We told you at that time we'd be back, that at that time we did not know what the council was going to approve, if anything at all, with regard to the building, what they'd want to demolish. Did they want to even do a project at the Grayson Power Plant? So now that we have some better direction from our council as far as what they'd like us to do, we're here to talk about the boiler building and its demolition and the demolition clearance application process. So this Grayson repowering project, as you likely know, has been a very, very long period of analysis and discussion in the city, 7 years now, including a lot of analysis of the historicity or not of the boiler building. The city has retained an environmental team to do the EIR, including historical experts, and they took a look at that. We presented to the City Council in December of 2020, and we discussed this boiler building and whether or not it's historical. The council directed staff to work with the Glendale Historic Society and to explore options for what could be done to preserve the historic aspects of the building, short of retaining it, given that the building really is needing to be demolished so that something can be built to continue to provide energy for the city. So staff did in fact do that, worked with the Glendale Historic Society, and of course responded to comments in the EIR process. So the EIR was certified by council in February of this year. And then in early March, council asked that the matter be brought back so that they could consider and decide about the natural gas aspect of the project. And so they asked staff to proceed with all aspects of the project, including preparing the site for the natural gas engines, doing the demolition, doing the site prep work, but to come back before the end of this year to make an actual decision about the demolition of, to make a decision about the procurement of new natural gas technology for the city. So that's where we are. We're now proceeding with the direction that council gave us, which is to go ahead and get going on the project. And one of the steps in that process is the demolition clearance application. So we've got a certified EIR, we've got a mitigation monitoring and reporting plan, including some mitigation measures related to the boiler building, and I want to talk a little bit about those with you as well. So there are 3 mitigation measures related to cultural resources in the EIR, really to preserve the historic, the memory of this building, to make sure that that's not lost and forgotten. So the first is to prepare hair documentation prior to demolition. That documentation will be maintained in the Glendale Central Library, as well as 4 photographs of, framed photographs of the building that will be in the Perkins Building, which is the Glendale Water and Power Building here on the city campus, just across the way. A plaque will be erected at Flower Street, that's the entrance to the power plant, that identifies the location and the historical context of that boiler building. And then lastly, and I think this is a very cool mitigation measure, is to preserve, a piece of the old equipment of the power plant. I think it's really just something interesting for folks to see how energy was generated back in the day versus how far we've come truly, and our journey to get to clean energy where we are today. So those are the mitigation measures that are in the EIR and that were approved in the Mitigation Monitoring and Reporting Plan. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dave Tadiosian, who is the city's consultant and project manager for the Grayson Repowering project. He's an engineer, and he knows far more about the shape and scope of the project and the layout and where the boiler building stands in relation to that. So I'll turn it over to Dave now.
Actually, I'm sorry, before you walk away, may I ask a question, since you're the city, representing the city attorney's office site? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so we have been hearing concern from the public that the, HPC was not included in much of this process till this point. And I don't know if you've had conversations with them or read any of the letters that we've received on the subject, but I'm wondering if you can speak to that. How is it that we're talking about a historic resource and reviewing a demolition permit for something that we've not yet even considered or had given a comment about whether or not it is historic and what other potential historic resources might be on that?
I'm going to ask my colleague Jillian Van Meiden, who's much better versed in this than I, to cover this question.
Thank you. And if I'm going out of order, please tell me we can cover it if it's going to be covered later.
Good evening. I'm Jillian Van Meiden. I'm a Chief Assistant City Attorney with the City Attorney's Office. And Christine and I have been working with GWP and with the whole project team on the environmental analysis that was done, and to ensure that that this project and the documents that were prepared follow all appropriate processes. I do want to note for you up front that after the City Council approved this project, 2 lawsuits were filed, one by the Sierra Club challenging the approval of the project, including the California Environmental Quality Act review, so the EIR, as well as from a local organization, Glendale Residents Against Environmental Destruction, which is a new organization that was created for purposes of representing the public principally on the environmental issues. So I want to couch my comments in the context of this existing and pending litigation, and to note that all of the issues, in fact, that are raised in the letter that came in dated July 27th from Francesca Smith are addressed in responses to comments and are part of the ongoing litigation. So I want to give that as a contextual preface to the comment that I'm going to make now, and that is concerning the jurisdiction that the HPC has. Yes?
Since you brought it up, I had a question for later, but I'll ask it now. These 2 lawsuits, having read the report, the timeline involved regarding the state deadlines, what influence or impact are these?
Your microphone.
Thank you.
Could you start over?
Sure. Thank you. Since you brought up the litigation, my question is, what influence will these 2 lawsuits have on the timeline imposed with the state on our power plant?
Well, they may or may not have an influence on that. There is no stay of activities to proceed with as Ms. Godinez has indicated, the authorization that the City Council has given the staff to move forward with the procurement of various. Christine, maybe you can summarize the various things that were authorized, but there is a lot of work that is prerequisite to any physical activity on the site. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the principal concern within, at least from the grade lawsuit, is the historic aspect of it. The other aspects are just the general adequacy of the analysis and the EIR, and that would be coming from the Sierra Club as well. So Sierra Club does not raise the historic issues. That's in the second lawsuit from Glendale Residents Against Environmental Destruction. So unless there is a move, and it is a move by the city to actually undertake physical activities on the site. And that would be up to those litigants to seek a stay in those activities.
Okay.
But, so if I
Sure.
can proceed and just
Thank
answer
you.
your
Yes, thank you.
jurisdictional question. So it is a question that was raised previously. It was addressed in responses to comments. Ms. Francesca Smith did submit a letter, and that is in our topical response 3, which is part of the final EIR, as well as an individual response to her letter. She does note in this letter a couple of issues that I think are important for the commission to know are not exactly accurate. And I think Christine has made this point already, and that is a statement that the city attorney argued at the HPC meeting regarding Grayson on January 20th, 2022, that Grayson would come to the HPC to seek approval for a demolition permit only after the city had approved the new project, including Grayson demolition, and certified the EIR. It's not entirely accurate because, as Christine just noted, we did not know whether at that point a project would be approved, or what alternative to a project, or whether, as what occurred in 2018, the team was sent back to undertake an RFP and look at additional clean energy options. So we did not have yet authorization to do anything without the input from the city council with the jurisdiction over the public fisc and a potential investment of $500 million in this project. And in order for them to take that discretionary action, providing direction to staff on what it is that they wanted GWP to do, before they could take that discretionary action, CEQA required them to complete the certification of an environmental document. And so that goes to another issue relative to the separation of alleged CEQA violation when the authority to approve or disapprove the project is separated from the responsibility to complete environmental review. That's the POET case versus Air Resources Board. That's exactly what we were required to do, was consider the environmental document before the city took a discretionary action. So that occurred first. So that's not an accurate statement that those things were separated. And a third statement that I just want to clarify is that we note that there is no mention in the final EIR of the requirements of the Glendale Municipal Code, which clearly addresses demolition of potential resources. In fact, in the responses to comments on page 7.54 and in topical response 3, those issues were specifically addressed in terms of what the jurisdiction is. So as for the jurisdiction and looking at the authority under 1522, Jay did mention that this is protective of the accidental, or in fact it said against the inadvertent destruction of buildings. That was the intent and purpose of 1522 relative to demolition permits. Here we have a project that is clearly, the intent is to make some changes to the site in order for the city to move forward with an energy project. Under the authority in 1522-025, the Historic Preservation Commission shall be the review authority for demolition clearance applications and any required review pursuant to CEQA and all other discretionary applications related to design review. This particular project is exempt from design review. And so that is one of the reasons it did not come as a package of entitlements previously to the HPC, which you would see with other private development projects that are subject to design review. This was a design review exempt project. In furtherance of that particular section, and it syncs with the powers and duties that are in 2.76100, which deals with the overall administration of boards and commissions. The duty, the grant of authority is to grant or deny applications for permits for demolition. And that is, yes, that's why we're here. So just to take this a little bit further, because it goes deeper into the code, deeper into the obligations and responsibilities in 1522. it says, under demolition clearance approval required prior to issuance of a demolition permit, this is at 1522-040, it says, demolition clearance applications may be processed concurrently with all other required discretionary applications, so think design review, and will not be approved until and unless all other discretionary permits for a proposed project are first approved. And that is what happened here. It is a little odd compared to a private project because the discretion was within the authority of the city council to move forward. And that was approved back in February and in March. And that discretionary authority required the secret review to be completed first. The next section, 1522-050, Historic Preservation Commission Review of Demolition Clearance Applications. So what that says is that the Historic Preservation shall review demolition clearance permit applications, environmental review documents that may be required. So that is a review. So part of what you will be undertaking in examination of this application for the demolition clearance is a review of those environmental documents. It does not say approval in this context. It says take a look at it, because it's conceivable that environmental documents were already prepared, not just for this project, but for other projects. And then a decision is made to proceed with demolition of what becomes a historic resource, or further research is done. So that review is part of within the authority. And it also says that for designated historic resources, and this is not a designated resource, and that is defined as means a historical resource that's listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and this is listed, right, the California Register of Historical Resources or the Glendale Register. So we're not dealing with a listed property here, and therefore it's not a designated historic resource. Excuse me, it's a discretionary resource, which is that the lead agency, here the City Council, has the authority to make a decision about whether or not it wants to treat it as a historic resource. It elected to do so. So this is not a designated resource. The authority here is that for a designated resource, the Historic Preservation Commission shall not approve a demolition clearance permit unless it finds it has certified a environmental impact report and adopted a statement of overriding considerations. So this particular requirement deals with the designated resources, not a resource that was elected on a discretionary basis to be treated as historic in the environmental document, and where other discretionary actions were required to be taken first that necessitated the review and approval of a CEQA document. So that is why we are here now with the information that we're presenting, is that we're just simply here for the demolition clearance application. The CEQA has already been completed, and that is a prerequisite to any action or decision that the HPC can take at this point in time. So our contention from the beginning, including in responses to comments, is that we are following the proper process, and that we have to look at this process and the jurisdiction of the HPC within the entire context of what the authority is of the HPC. So I hope that has provided some context for you. And
it does.
If you have any questions,
I do.
We're here to respond as
Just
best that we can.
one more question to help me sort
Sure.
of just fully understand this. Let's say in the EIR, it had been determined that, because, let me back up. According to what I understand of the final EIR, 2 independent historic evaluation consultants said that the Grayson power plant has no historic resources on it. The secretary, you probably know who I'm talking about. The state historic preservation officer declared that it's not a historic resource. Is it because those things in the IRR, because those groups all said that it's not historic, that it did not come before us? If one of them had said that it was historic, that it would have come before? This is the part where I'm getting a little bit confused. We're talking about the EIR being finalized, but I think the concern, at least what I think I'm reading in some of the concern, is that we were not at all involved in any of the comment, unless we were doing it as private citizens, with the draft EIR. And is that because there were considered no historic resources on the property? Is that ultimately why?
Well, now we have to provide a little bit more literal historical context for the progress of this project over time. So there was a final EIR prepared for a project back in 2018. And this preceded the adoption of the amendments to 1522 and the other code sections, which were completed in 2020. So on the yes, and that's where potential resources, the jurisdiction over potential resources, and Jay can correct me if I'm wrong, was added into the jurisdiction of the HPC to evaluate for purposes of demolition clearance permit applications. And there were some other changes. Was that a
Yes,
sufficient
so
explanation?
prior to the code changes, the demolition clearance process only extended to properties listed on the Glendale Register. And we recognize that that's a tiny speck in the ocean of our potential historic.
Yes. So because the, oh, sorry, go ahead.
So we had a final EIR that was out on the street for which comments had been received, and that was unbeknownst to the High-Speed Rail Authority, who came through and did a sort of windshield survey of the area and noted it was an old building, right? And did some preliminary analysis, but not an in-depth individualized assessment, which was what had occurred in relation to the Grayson project. And so that information was communicated to the state as part of their public comment process, and all public agencies and individuals can submit such comments, and that's what the city did, is provide this information. And on that basis, there was communications, and those were provided as attachments to Ms. Smith's letter, one from the High-Speed Rail Authority back in 2020, to Juliet Polanco, the State Historic Preservation Officer, where after further analysis had been completed in consideration of the individualized assessment that the city had prepared, that they reached the determination that it did not qualify for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. And Bert Rushing, with the Cultural Resources Program Manager with High Speed Rail, requested a concurrence from the California Department of Parks and Recreation, Office of Historic Preservation. That's Juliet Polanco. And she wrote him back within a month approximately, and that's that letter that you see as that attachment. We have reviewed the submittal. SHPO concurs that the Grayson power plant is ineligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. So that's what that was about, precisely. So in our subsequent correspondence with the Glendale Historical Society and various representatives therein, we decided to recommend that the city elect, which it has the authority to do so, to treat the boiler building, which is the principal concern here, as an historic resource on a discretionary basis. And so that is how there was a transition in response to concerns of the Glendale Historical Society from an initial assessment where, due to loss of integrity based on numerous expansions and changes to the building over time, that it was within this jurisdiction of the city to say, and authority to say, we'll elect to treat it as a discretionary resource. And on that basis, mitigation measures can be added. And these mitigation measures were developed in consultation and in conference with the Glendale Historical Society. They did recommend the hair survey. There were some additional mitigation measures that they sought that we did not choose to accept because they didn't have a nexus with the impact. So when you mitigate, you're mitigating an impact. So the Grayson power plant project doesn't have a citywide historical impact. And so there were some issues related to that we chose not to adopt, and we addressed those within the EIR specifically. But we did accept mitigation measures that would, as Christine said, reflect an an honorable treatment of the memory of the building and preserve its history, so anyone who was interested could find it at the library, would see that it existed on the site, could come to the city hall and be able to observe these antiquated pieces of equipment within a historical context statement to understand, as Christine indicated, where the city has come in terms of its energy production. So
Okay.
that's the background.
Jillian, would you like me to help them just quickly talk about like a thumbnail sketch of how 1522 would work in a different situation?
I think that would be useful because this is a different situation.
Yeah, this is so complicated in terms of the environmental and the level of review and the financial aspects and all of the other decision-making that had to go into this. But as an example, we have the South Glendale survey, or any other survey. South Glendale survey identifies properties, and some of them are identified as eligible for the Glendale Register. That means it's under our code, it's a potential historic resource. So, as an example, the owner of one of those properties comes forward and says, I want to tear this down and build a new house here. So let's just keep it simple, house to house, nothing unusual happening. Under 1522, we would bring that request to the Historic Preservation Commission. You would first make an assessment of whether you agree with the survey, because the survey is a windshield survey. It may have missed some significant issues at the back of the property that totally make the resource, possibly in HPC's opinion, not a resource. But if you agree that it is a historic resource, then you would direct the city staff to begin the EIR preparation process. The consultant would be hired by the city at the expense of the property owner. We'd move through that process. Once the EIR was ready for the draft phase, and then ultimately the final phase, both of those would come back to HPC for review. And if you felt that this was a historic resource and there was a significant adverse impact under CEQA and HPC did not want to approve that demolition, that's how you would vote. If for some reason, whatever this could be, you thought there were extenuating circumstances or other issues involved, HPC would also be able to issue a statement of overriding considerations, which is what happened with City Council. City Council certified the EIR for the demolition of the project and issued the statement of overriding considerations to explain why that decision came to pass. So that would be a much more typical situation, very straightforward, where every line of 1522 would apply directly to that situation, where here we have a much more complicated environmental review process. Hopefully that helped.
I thought you were going to expand on that last part. Okay, so I think I understand. That was not a surveyed building, right? I mean, it became surveyed through the process of the EIR, but it had not been previously.
We had public, DPR forms submitted from members of the public, so.
But prior to all of the,
It wasn't in a
years
big
ago,
survey.
9 years ago?
We had information coming in specific to the site rather than through a larger survey, but then there was also the High-Speed Rail Authority survey, so again, it's more complicated.
So when the city was working with the Historical Society to come up with these mitigation measures, and this is a process question, and by the way, I'm not of the mind that anything untoward was happening. I'm just trying to understand it because I'm being told that a lot of things were inappropriately managed. That is not a process that should have been brought before the HBC, the coming up of the mitigation measures or anything like that. It has nothing to do with us, right? It's just stakeholders in the community. There's no direction in the ordinance that says Historic Preservation Commission should be commenting on mitigation aspects to a discretionary resource. That's not, right? That's not basically why it didn't come before us, because it's not mandated to.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
May I ask, just out of curiosity, do you recall what some of the other suggestions were by TGHS that the city found to not be appropriate?
The one mitigation that we chose not to adopt was and correct me if my memory is wrong here, Christine, a survey of all city-owned property, through a historical survey of all city-owned property as mitigation for the demolition of the Grayson boiler building. And my understanding, Jay, is that we are undertaking various surveys around the city at this point in time,
Yeah,
so.
surveys haven't started, but we're going to be doing, we'll basically have at the end of this process, the entire city surveyed. We're doing East and West Glendale. We're going to add North Glendale to that process. Yes?
And City of Glendale properties are not exempt from these surveys, right?
City
No.
of Glendale properties are identified in surveys.
Yeah, okay.
And over the years, going back to, I guess, when Arlene Vidor was chair, and we had a very strong effort for the HPC to recognize city-owned properties. And in that process, we designated Municipal Services Building, the Brand Gates, and a couple of others.
Thanks,
and the-
thanks to Arlene Vidor. Sorry, I'm just going to give her a little acknowledgement. The Brand Cemetery.
Grand Cemetery, thank you.
So in terms of adopting mitigation measures, there has to be a nexus between the impact of the project and the mitigation itself. So there wasn't a close, a reasonable nexus between that request and that mitigation measure and the impact of the project.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If there are no more questions, I'll turn it over to Mr. Tadeusian. And feel free to ask questions as we go. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Dave Tadeusian. I'm a consultant to Glendale Water and Power, serving as the project manager. I'm going to talk a little bit tonight about the Grayson repowering and what led to needing to demolish the boiler building. First, though, at a high level, why is Grayson even being repowered? You know, the city, as you probably are aware, is a load pocket, has a load greater than the amount of transmission import, and Grayson serves to provide a source of local generation to deal with contingencies and peak loads. And so, when we went to City Council and got the EIR certified, and then at the March meeting, you know, one of the concerns has been that, well, can LA provide this function as well, instead of having to do something at Grayson? That meeting was suggested at the March 1st City Council meeting. That meeting actually took place with LA in March 21st. And LA basically reiterated, and a couple of city council members were present, as well as the city manager and the general manager for GWP, as well as LA DWP people. And they basically reiterated what GWP has been saying, that GWP is responsible for covering its reserves, even to the point if it's necessary to shed load to maintain those reserves, they need to do that. And that LA does not have the capacity to offer to Glendale instead of Glendale covering its own reserves. So when you take all that together, that's a pretty compelling case about why Glendale needs to have some local generation. When you look at how we permitted Grayson, we really didn't permit a lot of hours of operation because the intent was it's there just to deal with contingencies and those peak loads. It is not a base load power plant. It simply isn't permitted for that. So the other thing that's happening is that, you know, there's a big push to decarbonize because of the climate change issues. And so with that, electrification of buildings, transportation, that energy is going to be supplied by electricity in the future. And that's one of the issues that GWP is facing. Lastly, there are rules with South Coast that have been issued that basically at the end of 2023, you have to bring your units into compliance with current air quality standards, okay? Units that had older air permits that basically that grandfathering is coming to an end. We need to tell South Coast at the end of this year what our plans are for units 1 to 8. Unit 9 is going to be tweaked because it's capable of meeting the new standards, but units 1 through 5, the boilers are not. And Unit 8, modifying it, that was one of the alternatives in the EIR that was not selected. That was alternative 8. So with that in mind, all those things are driving the need to repower Grayson. This is a view of the Grayson Power Plant and the Utility Operations Center. The left half of this picture is really the utility operations center, and that supports the vehicles and the crews that are out maintaining the distribution system and so on. And it's really the portion to the right that is the Grayson power plant. This is an overhead view of the existing power plant. And there's really 4 areas. The top area is the Glendale rack. That's a switch yard. And that is slated to be demolished and replaced by the Glendale switching station, basically to provide a second way to connect the distribution transmission within the city, redundant to the Kellogg switching station. It won't be completely redundant though. The area in the middle is the boiler building, and then the shaded area at the bottom, that is largely the cooling towers, plus Unit 8 gas turbines and heat recovery steam generators. And then sitting at the right that's not shaded, that's Unit 9. That portion remains untouched. This is what the site will look like. And as you can see, we've pretty much shoehorned everything in. So the Glendale rack gets replaced by the Glendale switching station. Similar open air bus technology, but it packs a lot more into that space. To the lower left is the Wartsila power island. That's the big Wartsila engines. Those are located there for a couple reasons. They can't be located over the boiler building because of the need to drive piles. These engines are large engines. They are 3/4 of the length of this room in length. They are taller than this room is, and they're about half the width of this room. So these are fairly large reciprocating engines. And they need to be on a solid foundation. And the Grayson site, that is the most solid part of the foundation. As you go towards the Verdugo wash, the liquefaction issues that were talked about, those are more prevalent towards the Verdugo wash, the right-hand side of the slide than the left. And my apologies for the details, but you're into an area of mine that I like. So anyway, the Tesla batteries, they just sit there and hum, right? They're not moving around, so they go on the south end of the site. And then that brings us to the boiler building. So we can put the batteries over the boiler building, but we also need some buildings. And so the control room, the new workshop warehouse, and there's a power distribution center that takes in electricity and distributes it out to the auxiliary loads around the site. So those things are going over the boiler building. The boiler building gets demolished to below grade, and then, it's basically a large pit that goes into the ground. I don't know if you've been in there, and that'll be backfilled, compacted, and then that equipment, it's static. It can sit on top of that safely. This is what the boiler building looks like. We have views here from the 4 corners. So this is if you were on the east side where the railroad tracks are, just inside the wall, these are the views you would see. These are the views from the west side of the boiler building if you were in the middle of the site. And these are some views of other stuff that's going to come down. So like the Glendale rack on the left, that will be replaced by the Glendale switching station. And then these are just a couple of the cooling towers that will be demolished. So let's talk a little bit about the boiler building today. It is an island in a way, surrounded by basically high energy stuff. It's got switching station on one side of it. It's got cooling towers, and in the future, it's going to have batteries and the Wartsila power island around it. It's basically it's got Unit 9 to the south. It's surrounded by energized equipment. And there's really no public access to it. It's not something you just walk up to. You have to come through the UOC. It doesn't meet current building codes. I mean, it's an older building. And then lastly, there's a large inventory of hazardous materials in there. Asbestos insulation, for example, both thermal insulation, wire insulation, lead paint. The siding, the transite siding, that has asbestos in it. Why is it important to take it down? As you can see, you know, it occupies a large portion of the Grayson power plant footprint. And Grayson is really the only place within Glendale where you can do utility scale operations related to electricity. And that it makes it very valuable real estate. We tried to shoehorn in what we could, and as you can see, there's just really no other way to arrange it and still preserve the boiler building. You know, the switching station, it has to go outdoors. You can't, I mean, you could put it in a building, but it won't fit in that building. The batteries are designed for outdoor installation. The engines can't go over, can't go in, they can't go on top of it. They have to be outside, so that's really the physical constraints of the site. So what happens if the boiler building is not demolished? You know, something has to give. So if the boiler building stays, then, you know, the Wartsila engines, the batteries, something's got to give, right? The boilers can't be used after 2023, and the boilers and steam turbines are what's inside the boiler building. And so really what you end up with is a building, an unused building that is going to sit there, that has no public access, and it's going to need to be maintained. You know, you're going to need to spend resources to maintain it. You can't just allow it to sit there and slowly decay. That's not a good option. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Mark Young and to wrap things up.
Good evening. I'm Mark Young. I'm General Manager of Glendale Water and Power. I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this item. Very complicated, very controversial item we've been working on for a very long time. So today, this evening, we're going to ask you to approve the demolition clearance application for us to go ahead and proceed with the direction of council in order for us to maintain reliable electricity to the city of Glendale's residents. And we anticipate the demolition proposals to come in April sometime so that we can go ahead and move forward with council's direction. Demolition is planned for second quarter of '23. And we're running out of time being able to do this with the AQMD standard changes, and more importantly, the lack of energy in the state of California. So right now we're about 3,000 megawatts short, generally speaking, in California. If they shut down Diablo Canyon, that's another 2,400 megawatts. So you can see that we're energy deficient. So the more that the state is energy deficient, the less opportunity for Glendale to be able to procure the energy in order for us to be able to have that gap from when we do the demolition to when we get to a good functioning power plant that will take us into 2045, 2050, 2060. The critical dates for us is December 31st, 2022. We will have to tell Southern California Air Quality Management District what we're going to do with these buildings, with these boilers, and what we're going to do with the plant in general. And in a year from then, we'll be required to shut them down, even if those are being supplied to supply the city with power. So it would not matter to them, and we'll be forced to shut it down. So we're running out of time. And I'd like to thank you very much, and my staff and the consultants that are experts would be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, each of you, for a very professional presentation. Any questions from commissioners?
I guess I just have one maybe for the city attorney, one last very quick question. What happens if we deny the demolition permit tonight?
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. It's subject to appeal.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And the dates I was asking you about earlier are the two dates Mr. Young presented. If the lawsuit continues, could a judge move these dates back? Could a judge overturn these dates, overturn Rule 1135?
No, the judge doesn't have jurisdiction over separately promulgated statutory rules that are not being litigated specifically within this lawsuit. The litigants would be, the onus is on the litigants to request a stay of activities by the city. It's possible that this litigation could be resolved prior to that point in time. When it comes to an environmental document that's deemed inadequate, it's, as we say in CEQA parlance, if your document is inadequate, you go back and you fix it. You have to fix a ticket. So sometimes that just involves redoing and recirculating components of an environmental document, an entire environmental document, going through that process one more time where it's a draft subject to public review, and then returning to the lead agency for certification. So we don't know yet. We don't have hearing dates yet. We're still in very preliminary aspects of the case, meaning there's a long record. And a CEQA case is litigated on the administrative record. So all those documents have to be first assembled, and it has to be certified. Then the parties can meet, and the court can give direction on a briefing schedule and set a hearing. So we're not, we're still in the record preparation phase. Hopefully that answers your questions.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I have one more question of who would be asked of. I've toured the Hoover Dam and Grand Coulee Dam. Would it be cool to see inside all your old steam engines? Is that permissible? Since it's all so historic, just kind of neat.
I'd be happy to let you tour the facility. I started with the city of Glendale 33 years ago as a power plant operator. I'm actually very proud of that power plant, and I'd be happy to actually give you a tour of a power plant that has generating units from 1941 that are still
Right.
working.
That's awesome. Thank you.
I'll join that tour.
Sure. Okay.
Depending on the level of interest, you may be giving several tours.
Careful what you offer.
Very good. And then second, since you're up here, Mr. Young, the little kid in me has to ask, how will this be destroyed, and can I come see it? Was that going to be dynamited or blown up, or how will this look?
I think Mr. Tatatosian would probably be better off being able to answer the demolition concept, but no, it won't be blown up. I don't believe that it'll be blown up.
Specifically disallowed was that.
Because of the asbestos and so forth. But it's a concrete building. What would you do? Just
Is this true?
really?
It's not all concrete, so it's
I-beams.
kind of a metal shell material with lots of asbestos in it. So.
Okay. Yeah.
So when you see it, it's really an I-beam structure with a skin on top.
Oh, okay.
And it's got open grates for flooring for 6 stories. So if
Okay.
you're, I mean, we won't take you up to the 6th story, but if you were to actually go there, you could see the basement.
Nice. Very cool. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Questions?
No.
Comments? Public hearing item 7A is now closed. And I do have one last comment on it. Open.
Open.
I'm sorry, it's open. Having read many reports, and this was 88 pages of reading, and I wish I had seen your cool pictures in the report like we see other reports. It was a very well-written report. It held my interest reading it throughout to learn so much. And all the acronyms, oh my goodness. Okay. So, it is time for a vote.
No. Do we have any callers?
Oh, I'm sorry about callers. I forgot.
We have someone on the
I
line.
have to go back to my little screenshot
Does
here.
the chair have a preference for how long?
The typical speaker is allowed 3 minutes to speak, and then the applicant will be given an opportunity for rebutting and closing comments, and we'll have 2 minutes to speak after. Correct?
How many callers do we have, Jay?
We have one caller.
One caller. Okay, one caller, please state your name, address, and you have 3 minutes.
Francesca Smith,
Hi.
are you there?
Yes. Hi, good evening. Thanks so much. I have a big echo on my phone. Apologize. I would like an extra 2 minutes if possible, since that's the only caller this year.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. Please repeat that.
Sorry, there's a big echo. My name is Francesca Smith, and I'm requesting an additional 2 minutes. There are only, since there are only one of me calling in.
Yeah, that's still only one of you, but if you were present, you'd still got only 3 minutes as well. And so I'm going to hold you to 3 minutes.
Oh, thanks so much. Okay. Well, on behalf of Glendale residents against environmental destruction, which is pronounced GREED, not grade, I reviewed the FEIR for Grayson Repowering Plant project and the staff report for this evening. In light of the city's procedural and substantive violations of CEQA, we request that the commission, we object to the commission's consideration of this demolition as addressed in my overly long letter. There are numerous deficiencies in this request with CEQA conformance and with the City of Glendale's own historic preservation ordinance in both the EIR and in the decision you all are being asked to make. Part of it is the ongoing lack of a supplemental or updated cultural resources technical report that would support the boiler building's eligibility finding and would evaluate the property for its district eligibility. What makes it important? You all really have no idea. A tour prior to the meeting would have been extremely enlightening for the commission. I'd like to also correct the fact that the high-speed rails evaluation was a federal determination of eligibility under Section 106. The City of Glendale provided inaccurate information regarding numerous alterations to other parts of the property, not to this building, and none of TGHS's information. I consulted separately with the SHPO staff member who is responsible for overseeing national and California registration process with detailed information, and he clearly disagreed with the reverse determination that it was not eligible. That is why the city changed their minds. It's not because they thought it would be out of an abundance of caution as described. The lead agency's dogged insistence to not intensively reevaluate the entire property for eligibility and as a district is also problematic. You guys have been provided very little information to understand why it's significant. I also would like to bring up the inadequate one-sided discretion of the potential reuse. Mr. Platt's characterization that there was not adequate room to build the required components was not what was provided in the final EIR. And the engineer's explanation, including liquefaction, which is, by the way, not a word, was not part of that discussion in the FEIR. Current codes, the California Historic Building Code, and the presence of hazardous materials isn't a problem. Power plants are reused all the time. Also, this power plant, by the way, has 20-foot deep foundations. I'd also like to address the failure of the city to follow the required reviews and approvals in the proper sequence. The hair-splitting description by Ms. Van Meiden that this ordinance is to avoid inadvertent demolition makes no sense. It twists the facts to the city's benefit. PGHS provided the city with information proving that the property is historically significant in 2018. Their consultants who said it was not California or Glendale register eligible came clean to me and told me they had never listed a property in either register. I ask that you all do not vote to approve this application. You have not been provided adequate information, and the city is ignoring the law, the state law, as well as their own specified sequence of review in its own ordinance. Thanks very much, and if you have questions for me, you're welcome, of course, to ask.
Thank you very much. Any questions for our caller?
No.
No questions for our caller. Caller, I appreciate you very much taking the time and sitting through all this and waiting to call in. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
And thank you for your letter. Any other speakers? Public speakers?
No, there are no other calls. I'm sorry, there are no other calls.
Okay. Per my script, now I can say the hearing will be closed and the commission will discuss the project among ourselves and render a decision. Commission members may ask questions of anyone, but there will be no debate or further comments taken unless the chair reopens the public portion of the meeting. Okay, the commission may entertain staff comments and recommendations during its deliberation prior to making a decision. Now we come to our speaking parts. Okay. Commissioner Vartanian, do you have anything you wish to say?
So I'm just going to start by, actually I'm going to start by thanking my colleague, Commissioner Cragnotti, for all of your questions to help clarify a lot of the comments and questions we've been getting. I appreciate that, and I'd like to thank staff and the consultants and the city attorney's office for your explanations and clarifications today. So I'm just going to quickly quote 1522 has been quoted a lot tonight. I'm going to quote 1522-010 demolition permits, Glendale Municipal Code, reads in part, City Council finds that historically significant structures within the city constitute a cultural treasure for the entire community to enjoy, and that the preservation of these resources will promote the general welfare by maintaining an invaluable link to the city's rich and distinguished past. I think it's unfortunate that the boiler building is located or situated in a location which puts historic preservation in the conundrum we're dealing with today. But all things considered, ultimately, I believe the Grayson Repowering project is very important for the city's future utility needs to ensure we can continue to generate our own power and to provide cleaner power technology. So it is also unfortunate that the community has not been able to enjoy this structure at all because of its location and its utilitarian purpose. So unless the building can be moved to another location, which I thought TGHS might suggest, but no, and sorry, I don't mean to make light because this is serious. I'm okay with the mitigation measures provided in the MMRP, which include, and I'm going to restate them, a written history, photography, and drawings of the boiler building, which will be accessible to the community through the Glendale Public Library, and which will meet historic American engineering record documentation standards. A permanent plaque at the entrance to the Grayson power plant that identifies the location of the former boiler and provides a narrative historic context. Preservation of a piece of equipment from the boiler building, which will be displayed on a public location in the city along with a historic context statement. And I don't know who gets to choose that piece of equipment, but in any case, I'm sure it'll be a good one. And a display of photographs of the boiler building in a public location at the city's Perkins building. I did notice that MMRP said up to 4 pictures, but I think in our presentation tonight it said 4 pictures, so it would be nice to have 4. And those are my comments. I look forward to hearing my colleagues.
Thank you. Commissioner Cragnotti.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Vartanian. Before I speak about the actual, the power plant itself, I want to speak to I would like to make a request of the public that if members of the public have materials that they would like for us to review prior to a meeting, that they, particularly if there are several pages of material they'd like for us to review before a meeting, that they send them days ahead rather than just hours ahead. This morning, we received 68 pages of materials from one member of the public. Fortunately, I had a light afternoon and was able to go through the pretty much all of the material that was sent. It was interesting that the letter that this person provided, the letter was accompanied by several attachments. The letter that this person provided ended with the statement, if you feel you have not been able to research the matter sufficiently, feel free to abstain from the vote. I will say that had I not had a light afternoon, I would not have been able to review the 68 pages of documents that were sent to me today. This item has been agendized for 2 weeks now. So I just respectfully request of the public that you understand that we do have day jobs, and if you do want us to review information ahead of time, please give us plenty of time to do so. Secondly, in those, one of the things that person pointed out were the potential for reuse of the power plant, and this person referred to a couple of resources, 2 or 3 resources, different reports that had been put out about the reuse of power plants. I reviewed those materials as well. I went online and looked them up. None of them are actually reusing the power plant as a power plant. And I think that what we need to accept in Glendale is that that's where our power plant needs to be. Our power plant needs to be at that location. We can't put in a park. We can't put in a multi-use housing commercial district, a park along the river. We can't do that. That's where our power needs to go. So unfortunately, we can't reuse that space for anything else. And none of those suggestions were reusing an adaptive reuse of that space to continue as a power plant. So while I'm sure our representative from GWP who spoke with such pride about the units at the power plant who invited us, who was encouraged to invite us for a tour, I'm sure that I can imagine working there for all those years that there's some of this is with a heavy heart. I mean, that's a pretty amazing place that we have, and it has an amazing history, and it's really unfortunate that something like this has to be cast aside for the sake of progress. And it happens probably more often than we would like it to, but I don't think that it's certainly not my place to insert myself in this path of progress at this point. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I would also like to echo Mr. Carnati for your questioning to clear up matters when this meeting started. Taking the burden, I think, off of our shoulders as well. Thank you. And I look forward to touring this building. I, too, would love to preserve the old building. But if I look back, if I bought a 1941 Plymouth Country Squire station wagon and it still ran beautifully today, it would not be suitable for today's needs of energy with getting me around town. And we need to upgrade our power plant for more suitable reasons of energy. I was wondering, would one of those items on display be one of the turbines that still works? To cool and look at and save. I know one of the dam, I think it was Glen Cooley Dam or Hoover Dam, they have one of the turbines original on display to see for historical purposes.
If you want an answer, you have to reopen.
I'll be happy to reopen to public comments and hear from staff. Mr. Young?
So unfortunately, these turbines are pretty massive. And
Yeah.
even for Glendale, who has very small turbines, these components are very, very big. However, I've been looking at the plant and looking at opportunities. We have what we call the house unit, and the house unit produces 500 kW for emergency black star capability. And it's big enough, and it's old enough, and it might be the perfect opportunity for us to be able to memorialize that. Not to say that that's the item, but I'm very proud of that facility. So when we go ahead and tour, I'll show you what the turbines look like, I'll show you what the house unit looks like, and I'll show you my ideas on things that we might be able to save in order for us to memorialize this forever.
Nice. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Sorry, and just to follow up, do we have any thoughts on where that might go?
I think it all depends on what items that we're looking for, because these items are big. So we would have to determine, do we want to have a control panel? If we want to have the control panel, do we need the back of the control panel or just the front of the control panel? If we did that, we can put it in the foyer of Perkins. We can do certain things, but it all depends on what items we're looking to save. And as far as the 4 pictures, it's at least 4 pictures. I mean, I love that place. It made me come to California.
And would there be a thought of having a publicly accessible space like on the plant property, or is that not?
It's not possible for us. There's a wall around that facility. It's very secure. The federal government makes sure that we have security in that area, both cyber and physical security. So walking through the plant or having public access is very limited.
That makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
No questions? Okay, we'll close that comment again, and we're back to our own discussion. Any more discussion?
None.
None?
Thank you.
All right, it is now time for the chair to entertain a motion on item A, Grayson Repowering Project, the Grayson Repowering Project to accept demolition or deny demolition clearance application.
I move that the Historic Preservation Commission approve the demolition permit for Grayson Power Plant.
Okay.
Sorry, I'll second.
Okay, it is moved and seconded to approve the demolition clearance application for the Grayson Repowering Project. It's now time for roll call vote. Jay?
Commissioner Vartanian?
Yes.
Commissioner Cognani?
Yes.
Chair Doom?
Yes.
PC approves the demolition clearance application.
Very good. Thank you all very much for attending this evening. Appreciate your presentations. And item 8, Jay, is Community Development Department updates.
We started with this, we'll end with this. We are going to continue the update item for the overview of our design review process in historic districts. We're going to continue it to the next regularly scheduled meeting. We want to make sure that all 5 commissioners are present, so if at any of the next meetings not everyone is there, we'll just roll it forward until everyone can be hearing, listening, and talking about it.
Okay, when our next meeting would be scheduled?
August 16th is our next meeting. There's a possibility we'll be canceling that, so like I said, we'll just be moving it forward as we need to.
To September. That's right, you're on vacation.
Yeah, and that item wouldn't be heard anyway, so.
Oh, okay.
And
So
I just want to say I'm sorry that all 5 of us could not be here today for this discussion, even though I think there was going to be one recusal. So we like it when we can have a full board.
Yes.
HPC has an excellent track record of perfect attendance when we compare you to other boards and commissions, so.
That's something to be proud of.
It is. Yeah, a gold star for you all.
I was going to say, what's our prize? Okay.
There you go.
This is the first meeting I've attended with only 3 of us. I've been present where there was 4 people, but never 3 in the 5 years I've been here.
Yeah.
Sweet.
I move to adjourn.
Is moved to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Is moved and seconded to adjourn this meeting of July 28th, and so we are adjourned until our next. Thank you all for tuning in. Good night.